Welcome to This is Thailand. I'm glad you're here, and I want you to stay with me for this one, because this story is a little different from most of what we cover on this channel. Most of our stories start somewhere obvious. A bar on Walking Street, a dating app, a chance meeting in Pattaya that turns into something neither person intended. And there's nothing wrong with those stories. We tell them because they're true and because people need to hear them. But this one starts in a hospital car park in Limerick, Ireland, on a Tuesday afternoon in November, with a man sitting in a Ford Transit van, eating a ham sandwich he couldn't taste, trying to remember what day of the week it was because all the days had started to feel the same. His name is Nile Brennan. He's 65 years old. He's a retired plumber from County Limerick who spent 28 years running his own small outfit, who raised 3 children, who built a life from nothing but hard work and the kind of stubbornness the Irish do particularly well. He's not a naive man. He's not a reckless man. He's not the sort of man you point at and say, well, what did he expect? He's the sort of man you'd trust to give you a straight price for a job and show up when he said he would and leave the place clean when he was done. And that's exactly why I want you to hear what happened to him when he came to Thailand. I'm not going to tell you everything now. That's his job. What I will tell you is this: by the time Nile Brennan's story was over, he'd learned something about himself that no amount of common sense could have taught him. Something about what loneliness does to a man when he has money and no one watching, and how easily the need to be needed can be mistaken for something else entirely. This one's going to stay with you. Here's his story, in his own words. Right. So, I don't really know where to start with this, so I'll start where everything actually started, which was not in Thailand. It was in a consulting room at University Hospital Limerick in the spring of 2018, when a doctor with a very calm voice told my wife Mara that she had breast cancer, and my wife Mara, who was the steadiest person I have ever known, reached across and took my hand and squeezed it once firmly, as if she was the one comforting me, which she was. She usually was. We'd been married 40 years at that point. 40 years. I was 23 when I met her at a dance in the Parkway Hotel, and I didn't go home until 2 in the morning because I couldn't think of a reason to leave. She was from Ennis originally, a Clare woman, which meant she had opinions about everything and was usually right, which suited me fine because I had opinions about pipes and drains and not a great deal else. The life we had was simple, and it was ours. And I want to be very clear about this before I get into anything else. I was not an unhappy man before all of this. There are fellas who go looking for something different because what they had wasn't enough. That wasn't me. What I had was more than enough. I knew that then, and I know it now. The diagnosis was 2018. She died in February 22. 4 years. And I won't go through all of it in detail because that's not really the story, and also because I find it hard to talk about even now, which I didn't expect. I thought by this point I'd have it processed, as the grief counselor used to say, processed. As if grief was something you could put through a machine and it would come out the other end in a more manageable form. What I will say is that the last 18 months, I didn't work, not a day. I handed my 2 lads the customer list and the van keys, and I told them to get on with it, and I became, essentially, a full-time carer, driving Meyer to appointments, sitting in waiting rooms reading the same magazines, learning which wards had the best parking and which consultants ran on time and which ones didn't, making dinner she might eat half of, watching programs she'd seen before because they were easier, when you're exhausted, to watch something where you already know what happens. When she died, I was 63 years old, and I had not lifted a wrench in 18 months, and I did not know what to do with a Tuesday. The children were good. Sinead rang every Sunday without fail, and I appreciated that. I did, even if the cheerfulness cost her something. Ciaran, my youngest, found me a grief counselor, a nice woman in the city, and I went twice. She was very kind and asked good questions, and I found I couldn't answer most of them, not because I didn't know the answers, but because saying them out loud in a room with a stranger felt wrong somehow, like airing something that should stay private. My son Declan is in Melbourne, has been for 12 years. He sent money for me to come out and visit, put it straight into my account without asking. I looked at the flights several times. I never booked them. I'm not sure why. I think going to Melbourne would have meant explaining things to someone who loved me, and I wasn't ready for that. 14 months after my RA passed, I sold the house. It wasn't financial necessity. The house was paid off years ago, and I had the pension coming in, and I had savings besides. I sold it because I could not stop expecting her to walk out of the kitchen. Every single morning I woke up in that house, there was a half second, just a half second, before I remembered. And then I remembered. And I did that every day for 14 months, and then I decided I couldn't do it anymore. So I sold it. Got a fair price. Put just under €165,000 in an account and moved into a rented flat in the city center. 2 bedrooms, nice enough, nobody's home. I'd sit at the kitchen table in the evening and think, right, what does a man do now? What do you do when you're 64 years old and you've had your whole life already and there's still, apparently, quite a lot of time left? I wasn't depressed, I don't think. Or maybe I was, mildly, in the way that's so ordinary it doesn't have a name. I ate fine, I slept fine, I slept fine. I watched the television. I went for walks along the canal. I just had this very persistent sense that whatever I was supposed to be doing next, I hadn't figured it out yet, and the flat was very quiet in a way that was different from the house being quiet. The house had a silence with a shape to it, if you know what I mean. Like the shape of the person who was missing, the flat was just empty, which was almost easier in a way and also somehow worse. Thailand came from Facebook, which is not something I ever expected to say. I'm on Facebook in the way men my age are on Facebook, which is to say I use it to look at things and never post anything myself. I joined a group for retired expats abroad, one of those general interest things, and it turned out half the members were in Southeast Asia. Mostly British fellas, some Australians, the odd American. Photographs of food, sunsets over water, captions about how far the pension goes, how the weather's reliable, how they've never felt better. I want to be very honest about what I was and wasn't looking for when I started reading those posts. I was not looking for a young woman. I was not looking for the nightlife which they hinted at and which I had absolutely no interest in. I was looking at the numbers. I was looking at the cost of living, the warmth, and the distance particularly. I wanted to be somewhere that wasn't Limerick, that didn't know me as Mara's husband, that didn't look at me with that particular expression people have when they're being kind to you about your grief, and you can see the effort it cost them. I spent about a month reading before I did anything. Then I booked a flight to Chiang Mai. I chose Chiang Mai specifically, and I want to be clear about this because it matters to how I understood myself at the time. I didn't book Pattaya Tuan, didn't book Bangkok Tuan, chose Chiang Mai because it was temples and markets and history. It was a real city with a real culture. It was, and I specifically used this word in my own head, respectable, which tells you everything you need to know about how I was thinking. I told Sinead I was seeing a bit of the world. She said that was great, Dad. Brilliant. You should absolutely do that. Declan said less, in the way that meant more, but I told myself he didn't have the full picture and left it at that. I was 64 years old. I had €165,000 in an account and no reason to stay where I was. I bought a ticket, one way, with the return to be sorted later. That's where it starts. The flight from Dublin to Chiang Mai is not a short one. 2 connections. About 19 hours door to door if everything goes right, which it mostly didn't. I sat in Bangkok's Suvarnabhumi airport at 2:30 in the morning, waiting for my connecting flight to the north, surrounded by noise and light and the particular chaos of a very large Asian airport that never actually closes. And I thought, well, Nile, you've done it now. I want to tell you about arriving in Chiang Mai because I think it matters, the gap between what you imagine and what you get. I've been looking at photographs for months. Sunset over Doi Suthep Mountain, the moat around the old city, lit up at night, monks in orange robes, markets, all of it real as it turned out, but none of it. The thing you notice first. The thing you notice first is the heat. I came out of the airport in May and it was 38 degrees and the air sat on me like something with weight. Not warm the way a good Irish summer is warm, the 3 days a year we get one. This was a different category entirely. The back of my shirt was soaked before I'd reached the taxi rank. A tuk-tuk driver quoted me a price to the city and I hadn't the first idea if it was fair, and I paid it and sat in the back watching Chiang Mai materialize through the windows. The traffic, the Watts with their golden spires, the 7-Elevens every 200 meters, the smell of exhaust in Frangipan, and something frying somewhere that I couldn't identify but that made me realize I hadn't eaten since Bangkok. I booked a guest house near the old city. Small room, clean enough, fan that worked hard and achieved little. €40 a night. I lay on the bed at 11 in the morning and listened to motorbikes outside and thought, right, here I am then. The first week was honest adjustment. The food took some getting used to. I'm not what you'd call an adventurous eater. A lifetime of Myre's cooking will do that to you. But I found a place near the Tia Phaya gate that did kalpad, fried rice with egg and vegetables, for 60 baht, which at the time was about €1.50, and I ate there most mornings and considered it a victory. I walked the old city, went through Wat Chedi Luang, and stood there looking up at the ruined Chedi and felt, genuinely, something settle in me that had been agitated for a long time. Not happiness exactly. More like the absence of a particular kind of tension. The anonymity was the thing. I cannot overstate how much that mattered in those early weeks. Nobody in Chiang Mai knew me as anything. Not as Mary's husband, not as the man whose wife had died, not as Nile Brennan the plumber who used to do the council contracts. I was just a farang, which is what they call foreigners here. Just one of the pale-skinned older men you see wandering around the old city with a water bottle and a confused expression. It was, in its strange way, a relief. I extended the first trip from a month to 6 weeks. Went home briefly, sorted some things out, came back for another month. By the third visit, I'd stopped booking the return flight in advance. I'd just buy one when I needed it. I told myself this was sensible, flexible, not locked in, keeping my options open. Looking back now, I think I was already in some quiet part of myself, not going home. I did the retirement visa on the third visit. You can get one at 50 and over, provided you can show 800,000 baht sitting in a Thai bank account, which is roughly 20,000 euro. Or you can show proof of a pension income above a certain threshold. I had both, just about, between the pension and the savings. An expat in the guest house common room walked me through it. I sat across from a woman at the Chiang Mai immigration office on Promenade Road with my documents in a folder, got fingerprinted, paid the fee, and walked out with a visa that let me stay a year. Renewable. Just like that. I was 64 years old and I was a legal resident of Thailand, which was not a sentence I had ever expected to be able to say. I found a proper apartment in the Niman area. Modern block, good air conditioning, small balcony where I'd sit in the evenings with a Leo beer watching the traffic on Niman Hayman Road below. 350 euros a month. Compare that to the rented flat in the city center at home, which was costing me over 1,000. The arithmetic was impossible to argue with. The Sunday walking street market on Wallai Road starts in the late afternoon and runs into the night, and in those early months it was one of my regular Sunday habits. You walk a long street that's closed to traffic, both sides lined with stalls selling food and clothes and silver jewelry and silk, and the kind of tourist things you expect. Grilled pork on sticks, fresh cut fruit in bags, the smell of pad thai from a dozen woks going at once, old ladies selling flowers for the temples, children running between adult legs. I wasn't looking for anything on the Sunday I met Nook. I want to be clear about that too, because I've gone back over it many times and I believe it's true. I was looking at scarves, actually. I'd thought I might send something home to Sinead. There was a stall with silk scarves in reds and golds and deep blues, and I was standing there holding one up and trying to work out whether Sinead would actually wear it or whether it would sit in a drawer, and a voice beside me said, in careful, considered English, that the color would suit a woman, and with dark hair if that was any help. I turned around. She was in her mid-30s, slight dark hair pulled back, wearing a green apron over a plain shirt. Her own stall. She had a quiet directness about her that I noticed immediately. Not the cheerful performance you sometimes get in markets where they're trying to sell you something. Just a straightforward observation, offered and left there. I said my daughter had dark hair as it happened. She smiled and told me that one was 800 baht and held it out. I said 800 baht, is that right? Because back home that'd get you about half a pasty. I don't know why I said it like that. Irish habit, I suppose. Making a small comment about the price of things without actually objecting to it, and she laughed. A real laugh, not a polite one. She said, "Where is back home?" I told her Ireland. She said she had never met anyone from Ireland before. I bought 3 scarves. I have no idea why I needed 3. I think I was just not ready to stop talking. I came back the following Sunday. She was there. We talked for longer this time, standing at the edge of her stall, the market moving around us. She told me her name was Nook, a nickname, the Thai way, almost everyone has one, and that she also cleaned rooms at a hotel near the night bazaar during the week. She asked what I'd done for work. I told her, plumber, 28 years, my own outfit. She nodded and said, "So you understand how things are built?" I said, "I suppose I do, yes." I came back the Sunday after that. I wasn't one of those lads down in Pattaya. I knew exactly what went on there. You couldn't be in Thailand 6 months without knowing. The bars on Walking Street, the women out front in the evenings, the whole arrangement that everyone understands and nobody says directly. I'd heard the stories in the guest house from fellas who'd been here years. Bar finds out lady drinks, the whole vocabulary of it. I had no interest in any of that. None whatsoever. I was having a conversation with a woman at a market stall about scarves in Ireland and what it means to understand how things are built. That's all it was. I told myself that every Sunday on the walk back to the apartment, and I believed it completely, and I wasn't even entirely wrong. I want to be careful here because I think this is the part that matters most, not the money, not the ending, this part, the beginning of it. Because if I can't explain this part honestly, the rest of it just sounds like a stupid old man making obvious mistakes, and I don't think that's quite what it was. After the third Sunday at the market, Nook suggested we get something to eat at a place nearby. A small restaurant, plastic chairs, fluorescent light, a laminated menu with photographs. She ordered for both of us, khao swa, which is a northern Thai curry noodle dish, rich and slightly sour, with crispy noodles on top, and we sat across from each other and talked for nearly 2 hours. About Chiang Mai. About Ireland. About the difference between cleaning hotel rooms and selling scarves, which she described as the difference between invisible work and visible work, and I thought that was a very precise way of putting it. She told me about her daughter that evening. Lolita, she said, but everyone calls her Lolly. 7 years old, in school near the house, very serious, very quiet. She showed me a photograph on her phone, a small girl in a school uniform, standing very straight, looking at the camera with the particular gravity of a child who has been asked to stand still and is determined to do it correctly. I asked about the father, carefully, the way you do. She said it simply. He had gone to Bangkok for work 2 years ago. He sent money sometimes, not regularly. They were separated, she said, though she used the word carefully, like she was choosing it from a selection. She did not elaborate, and I did not push. I was Irish and Catholic and 64 years old, and I understood that some things were said plainly because going further was too much trouble. What I noticed, and what I kept noticing, was that she didn't perform any of this. There was no reaching across the table for sympathy, no lingering on the difficulty of her situation. She stated it and moved on, the way people do when they've come to terms with something rather than when they're using it. I had heard enough stories from expats by this point to know what the other version looked like. The fast intimacy, the immediate sob story, the hand on the arm. This was nothing like that. We met for food the following week, and the week after. By the 4th or 5th week, it had become something I looked forward to in a way I hadn't looked forward to anything in a long time. That's the truth of it. I'm not going to dress it up. She made a Tuesday feel different from a Wednesday, and after the previous 2 years, that was not a small thing. She listened when I talked about Mary. That sounds like a simple thing. It wasn't. At home, any time Mary came up in conversation, there was this particular shift in people's faces. A bracing, like they were preparing to deal with something difficult. People who loved me, Sinied, Siaran, they'd listen and then pivot as quickly as they decently could toward something lighter, because grief is heavy, and after a certain point, people who love you still want you to be all right, which means they sometimes need you to pretend that you are. Nook didn't do that. She'd ask a question. What did she look like? What was she good at? What was the funniest thing about her? Real questions. And I'd answer and she'd listen, and when I stopped, she'd just sit with it for a moment, which is what you actually want someone to do, and almost no one does. I'm telling you this so you understand that it wasn't about a young woman or the novelty of Thailand or any of the things that people will assume. What it was about was someone treating the thing that had happened to me as a real thing, worth sitting with. After 2 years of people trying to help me move past it, that felt, I can only say, like being seen. The first money was entirely my idea. I want to be precise about this. We'd been meeting for about 2 months when she mentioned offhand that her mother had a doctor's appointment that week. Blood pressure, nothing serious. I asked without thinking whether she needed anything for the cost of it, and she said no, it was fine, and I said, "Are you sure?" And she said yes. And then I said, "Look, here," and I put 3,800 baht on the table, about €100, and told her to stop being polite. She looked at the money for a moment, then she looked at me, and she said, "You are a very kind man, Nile." Those were her exact words. A very kind man. I drove pipes through concrete walls for 28 years. I crawled under floorboards in January in the rain. I was not a man who had been told regularly that he was kind. It was a good marriage. Mara loved me, but that's a different thing from being looked at by someone and named like that. I felt the money leave the table and I thought nothing of it beyond satisfaction. That's just what a decent man does when someone needs help, and he has the means. My father would have done the same. I didn't register it as the first step of anything. About 6 weeks after that, she invited me to her family home in the village, 40 minutes outside the city, on a Songtiu, the red truck taxis they use for getting around the suburbs. The house was modest, single-story, corrugated roof, a garden that was more practical than decorative. Her mother was a small, compact woman in her 60s who said very little but fed me continuously and kept refilling my cup of Nescafe whether I'd finished the previous one or not. And I sat in a plastic chair in that garden in the afternoon heat, with the smell of jasmine coming from somewhere and a small serious girl showing me her school copybook, and something in me that had been held very tightly for a very long time just let go. Not dramatically, just quietly, like a fitting that's been under too much pressure finally equalizing. Lolly showed me her English homework. She'd written out a sentence and spelled necessary with 1 C and 2 S's, which as it happens is the most common way to get it wrong. I pointed to it and said, "Actually, it's 2 C's and 1's. She looked at the word, then at me, then wrote it again correctly in the margin and looked up to check if I'd noticed. I told her that was exactly right. She went back to her copybook. Nook's mother gave me more coffee. I drove back to Niman that evening and sat on my balcony with a Leo and thought about what my life had looked like 12 months ago, the rented flat, the canal walks, the Tuesday that was the same as Wednesday. I did not think about whether any of this was wise. It didn't feel like a question that needed asking. Looking back now, I can see that the pattern was already there, fully formed, from the moment I put that money on the table, that I had volunteered, that she had not asked, and that the not asking was, for me specifically, with my specific history and my specific need, more effective than any asking could ever have been. I didn't see that then. I only saw that for the first time in a long while, I had somewhere to be. By the 3rd month, I'd stopped counting the Sundays. That's the clearest way I can put it. The market visits had become something else, Not a weekly event I went to, but a rhythm I lived inside. Wednesday I might help Nook collect Lolly from school if she was held up at the hotel. Saturday we'd walk the night bazaar, not buying anything much, just walking. Sunday the market. The in-between days I go about my own business morning walk. Breakfast at my usual place near the old city. An afternoon reading on the balcony. But those days had a different quality now. They were the spaces between things rather than the things themselves. I want to be clear about the financial part of this, because I think people hearing this story will imagine it happened a certain way, and it didn't happen that way. There was no single moment where I was asked for a large sum of money and agreed against my better judgment. It was nothing like that. It was a series of small, reasonable decisions that I made with full information and clear eyes, every one of which made complete sense at the time. The monthly contribution started in October. We were having dinner at a place near the night bazaar she liked, maybe 80 baht each for the food. Less than €2, and she mentioned that her hotel shifts had been cut, nothing dramatic. The hotel had reduced hours for the cleaning staff during the low season. She said it matter-of-factly, as she said most things, and then changed the subject. I brought it up again at the end of the meal. I said, look, while things are tight, let me help with the house expenses, just until the hours come back. She said she couldn't ask that. I said she wasn't asking, I was offering, and what was 15,000 baht to me? Which was the truth. 15,000 baht is roughly €400. Against 165,000 sitting in an account, it's the equivalent of putting your hand in your pocket for a round. I had spent more than that in a single month on Mary's private consultations, and I hadn't given those a second thought either. So that began. 15,000 baht a month, transferred to her account on the 1st. And I want you to note that the hotel hours never fully came back to what they were. I noted it too, at some level. I filed it somewhere and kept going. The roof was different. The roof I take full responsibility for in a very specific way. She sent me photographs in November. Water damage to the back section of the house, visible staining across the ceiling, a section of the corrugated sheeting that had clearly been compromised. I looked at those photographs carefully. Then I asked if I could come out and look at it properly, in person, before any decisions were made. And I went. And I walked around that house the way I'd walked around 1,000 houses in Limerick over 28 years. I looked at the structure, I looked at the drainage, I looked at where the water was coming in and where it was tracking to, and I made an assessment. It was a genuine problem. The damage was real. Left another season, it would be significantly worse and significantly more expensive. I knew what I was looking at. That was the phrase I used to myself, and I meant it as a point of professional pride. I looked at it myself. I know what I'm looking at. The contractor was Nook's cousin. I noticed that. I noted it consciously and I kept going, because I also looked the man in the eye and he seemed straightforward to me. And because I had just assessed the damage myself, and it was genuine, and the quote he gave me, 240,000 baht, roughly €6,200, seemed within a reasonable range for the work required. I counted out the cash from the envelope I brought. The work took 2 weeks. The roof held. I never found any problem with the roof. I tell you that because I think it matters. The roof was real. The damage was real. The repair was done properly. The contractor may well have been charging a farang premium on the labor, and looking back now, almost certainly was. But the job itself was legitimate. Every step had a reason. That's what I keep coming back to when I go over it. Every single step had a visible, verifiable, sensible reason. The scooter was straightforward. November, just after the roof was settled. She'd been taking the Saint-Dieu to the hotel each morning and back again in the evening, 40 baht each way, 80 baht a day, which sounds like nothing except when you calculate it against her reduced wages. She'd mentioned, once, that a second-hand scooter would make things easier. I went with her to a shop near the Niman Road, and we came out with a decent second-hand Honda for 45,000 baht, €1,100. She drove it to work the following morning. I watched her go from the street and felt, I will not pretend otherwise, something like satisfaction. The school fees were January. Lolly's school, the local one near the village, was fine in the way that free things are fine, which is to say it was there and functioning and not much more. There was a better school 30 minutes away, a private school, with smaller class sizes and more English instruction. Nook had never mentioned it to me directly. I found out about it from something Lolly said, about a girl in her class who went there instead and learned English faster. I asked Nook about it that evening. She said it was too expensive. I asked how expensive. She said 110,000 baht for the year, €2,800. I said, well, let's sort that out then. I paid for the full year, bank transfer, same day. And I want to tell you about the moment after because this is important. Nook was quiet for a bit. Then she said, Lolly will want to thank you herself. And the following Sunday, when I came to the house, Lolly had made me a card, drawn on paper in colored pencil. A picture of a house, the family house, recognizable by its shape and 2 figures outside it and a sun in the corner with rays coming off it in every direction. One of the figures was taller than the other by quite a lot. She'd written inside it, in English printed very carefully, "Thank you, Nile. You were good." I still have it. I'm not going to say any more about that. The running total by the end of January 2024 was something I had deliberately not calculated. The monthly contributions, the roof, the scooter, the school fees, various meals and small things in between. I could have sat down with my phone and added it up in 3 minutes. I chose not to. Looking back now, I can see that the not calculating was its own kind of decision. If I put the number in front of myself, I'd have to ask what the number meant, and I wasn't ready to ask that question. I was comfortable. I was useful. I had somewhere to be on a Wednesday and a Saturday and a Sunday. The figure, as it turned out, was somewhere north of €18,000. I did not know that then. I'm fairly confident in hindsight that I didn't want to. By January 2024, I had been in Chiang Mai for the better part of 8 months, and I had, without quite deciding to, built a life there. Not a tourist's life. An actual life, with a shape to it. Mornings I walked the moat road, the one that rings the old city, about 5 kilometers if you do the full circuit. I'd stop at a stall near the southwest corner that did mu ping, little pork skewers grilled over charcoal, 2 for 20 baht, and eat them standing up watching the monks do their alms round in the early light. Afternoons I read, or walked to Niman, or sat in a coffee shop near the university where they knew my order. I was becoming, without planning it, a regular, a known quantity. That mattered more than I would have expected. At Christmas, Lolly drew me a picture. This was December, just before the school fees, before I'd even raised the subject of the better school. She just drew it and gave it to me when I came to the house for dinner on Christmas Eve, which I spent with Nook and the mother and Lolly eating tom kha gai and sticky rice and watching Thai television I couldn't follow. The picture was a Christmas tree, roughly done, with what I think were meant to be presents underneath. She'd written "Merry Christmas, Nile," missing the T in Christmas, which I noticed and said nothing about because it was a Christmas card and she was 7, and even I know when to put the teacher instinct away. Nook's mother had taken to calling me Lung Nile. Lung means uncle in Thai, a respectful term for an older man, and Nook explained that it was the polite way her mother had decided to address me. I didn't fully understand the social mechanics of it, but I accepted it without question. I was Lung Nile. I had a name in this house. After 2 years of being primarily a bereaved person, of being defined by what had happened to me, having a name that was just mine felt like something. I booked Pattaya in late January. My idea, entirely. I thought a change of scenery would be good. A few days, somewhere different. I'd never been, and Nook had been once, years ago, and I thought, why not? It's a few hours on the bus, we'd have a look around, see the beach, eat some seafood. I want to be honest about Pattaya because I think it's important to this story. It is exactly what people say it is. The beach road is lined with hotels, and the evenings bring out a particular economy that is conducted in plain sight. And by the time we arrived on a Friday afternoon and checked into a decent hotel near Jomtien, away from the worst of it, I was already aware of how this looked. An Irishman of 65 and a Thai woman in her mid-30s walking together in Pattaya. I was aware of it in the way you're aware of something you've already decided doesn't apply to you. We walked the beachfront on the Saturday afternoon. It was 32 degrees and the Gulf was flat and green-gray, and there were boats out on the water, and the promenade had families on it and couples and groups of men in various states of the holiday that Pattaya offers. I saw them. I registered them. Older Western men, a good number of them, with younger Thai women beside or behind them. The whole arrangement obvious and unremarkable to everyone present. I looked at those men and I went through my list. I met Nook at a market stall. She had never once asked me for money. I had been to her family home, I knew her mother, I knew her daughter. I had assessed the roof damage with my own professional eyes. I had chosen to help with the school fees unprompted. The relationship had a history, a texture, a genuine accumulation of shared time. I was not those men on the promenade. The differences were specific and verifiable, and I had them ready because I had, without fully realizing it, been maintaining that list for months. That is what I mean when I say the case I'd built for myself was thorough. Any doubt that arrived had to find a gap in a very solid wall of reasoning. I've been building it since August. We had seafood that evening at a restaurant on the pier, grilled prawns and a whole fish, 2 Chang beers each, and we talked for a long time about nothing in particular, and it was one of the nicest evenings I'd had in years. I'm not going to revise that because of what I know now. It was a genuinely good evening, and I was genuinely happy, and I think she was reasonably content too. Though what exactly she was thinking, I cannot say with any confidence, and I've stopped trying. Declan rang on the Sunday, the video call. He was in his kitchen in Melbourne Sunday morning, his time. He asked how I was keeping, and I said grand. I was in Pattaya for a few days as it happened. He said Pattaya, right, and there was a pause, and then he said casual, like it had just occurred to him. Are you seeing anyone, Dad? I said I'd made a friend. Yeah. He said right again. That word. I've thought about that word more than is probably healthy. The weight he put into it. He didn't follow up, didn't push, didn't say what he clearly had formed an opinion about. He asked about the weather and whether I was eating properly and rang off after 20 minutes. And I sat with my phone in my hand in the hotel room and I went through the list again, the full list. And I concluded that Declan didn't have the information required to have a useful opinion. He hadn't met Nook. He hadn't seen the context. He was imagining something from a distance, and the thing he was imagining wasn't what this was. I nearly rang him back. I want to say that. I came close to saying, look, let me tell you about it properly, and you can tell me what you think. I picked the phone up twice, but explaining it meant justifying it, and justifying it meant admitting there was something to justify, and I wasn't ready for that either. When we got back to Chiang Mai, I noticed, over the following weeks, that Nook was sometimes harder to reach in the evenings. A message left on read for 2 hours. A call that rang out and was returned 40 minutes later with an explanation about the hotel, about being tired, about Lolly needing help with something. Any single instance was entirely reasonable. It was the pattern that was less so. But I knew what exhaustion looked like. I'd spent 18 months living inside someone else's exhaustion. I told myself hotel work was grinding and she deserved the evenings to herself, and I wasn't the sort of man who needed to account for every hour. The list held. The wall held. For a while longer, it held. It was a Wednesday evening in March. I know it was a Wednesday because I'd been at the coffee shop near the university in the afternoon, and had walked back along the moat road the long way, stopping at a place I liked near the north gate for a bowl of khao soi. So a Wednesday. That detail matters to me now in the way that pointless details matter when something significant happens near them. Nook was at the apartment. She'd come after her hotel shift, as she did some evenings. We'd eaten, we'd talked, and she'd fallen asleep on the sofa with the television on low, which happened sometimes, and I'd left her there and gone to make tea in the kitchen. Her phone was charging on the small table near the window. The screen lit up. I wasn't looking at it. I want to be precise about this. I was in the kitchen, and I saw the light from across the room, and I registered it the way you register anything that lights up, peripherally, without intention. I came back into the room, and the screen had gone dark again, but I'd seen, in that brief moment, the shape of it. A name. A profile photograph of a man, Thai, mid-30s, and, in the preview of the message, just a fragment, just enough to see before the screen went dark. A brevity. A particular compression of words that people use when they're not composing for an audience. I have been married 40 years. I know the difference between how a person texts a friend and how they text something else. You learn the register. You know it the way you know the register of a pipe joint, whether it's right or whether there's movement where there shouldn't be. I did nothing. I went to bed. She left in the morning and I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and I thought about it for a long time, and then I did not think about it deliberately for several days, which is a different thing entirely. The name appeared again. I saw it twice more over the following week, both times late. Once at 11:20 on a Thursday. Once just after midnight on a Saturday. She was at home those evenings, not with me, and she told me she was tired. I had believed her. I had had no reason not to believe her at that point. Now I had a small, cold, specific reason. I downloaded a translation app at midnight on the second Saturday. I'm not going to dress that up. I sat in my apartment in Chiang Mai at midnight looking at my phone screen, feeling ashamed of myself, and then angry at the shame, because, and I actually went through this argument with myself, alone. At midnight it was my own phone, it was my own apartment, and I had seen what I had seen. And then I thought, but it's not my phone she texts on, and it's not my apartment she goes home to. And the argument stopped there because I had run out of road. The translation app didn't give me much. The messages I'd glimpsed were too brief and too fragmentary, and my tie is non-existent. What I had was a name and a time of night, and a feeling in my stomach I recognized from decades of professional life. The feeling of arriving at a job and knowing before you open the wall that something has been wrong in there for a long time. I found the investigator through a private Facebook group, long-term Chiang Mai residents, mostly expats, mostly men who'd been there long enough to have needed various services the official channels don't provide. Someone had posted a recommendation some months back, background checks, general inquiries, very discreet. I sent a message. Got a reply within the day, met the man at a coffee shop on the Nimmenhamen Road the following Tuesday. He was Thai, 50s, very ordinary looking, which I suspect was professionally useful. He explained his rates plainly. 14,000 baht for a week's work, €350. I said yes. I was embarrassed to be doing it. I want to be honest about that. I would have told anyone who described doing what I was doing that it was a violation, that it was the action of a man who didn't trust the person he was with, and that if it had come to that he should ask the question directly or say goodbye. I would have meant all of it. I was also, at that point, no longer entirely sure who I was in relation to that principle, because the man I'd been at the start of this story would not have been in this coffee shop talking to this man about that woman. The report came back the following Tuesday. A printed document, a few pages, some photographs. I sat with it in my apartment for 20 minutes before I read it properly. Nook's husband had not gone to Bangkok. He lived 20 minutes from the family house. He visited the house on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Lolly saw him on weekends. There was no divorce record because they had not divorced. They were, by any legal measure, still married. I put the document down on the kitchen table and I looked out at the balcony and the street below, and I thought about the word she had used. Separated. How she had chosen it carefully. How I had understood that some things were said plainly because going further was too much trouble. I had read her restraint as dignity. It had not been dignity. Or perhaps it had been, of a kind. I still don't entirely know. I sat with the information for 2 days. I went for my morning walks. I ate at my usual places. I did not go to the family house. I did not send any messages. I was waiting for something to settle in me before I did anything, and what settled was not anger, which surprised me. What settled was a very familiar tiredness. The same tiredness I'd carried out of 18 months of hospital visits and care routines. The tiredness of having given everything to something and arriving, at the end of it, with nothing you'd planned for. On Thursday morning, I asked her to come to the apartment. We sat at the kitchen table. I made coffee. I put the document on the table between us. I did not accuse. I did not perform anything. I told her, quietly, what I knew. The name on the phone, the investigator, what the report said. I didn't raise my voice. I am not built for scenes. My father wasn't either. We are, in the Brennan family, people who say the hard thing plainly and then stop talking. She looked at the document for a moment. Then she cried. And here's the part one cannot resolve, and I have stopped trying to resolve it. The crying was not entirely performance. I am as certain of that as I am certain of anything in this story. Some part of what came out of her in that moment was real. Whether it was grief for what had happened, or guilt, or something more complicated that I don't have the right words for, I don't know. I will never know. She offered an explanation. Her husband had come back from Bangkok. There was no good situation. It was complicated in ways that were hard to explain. She was very sorry. Her exact words, and I remember them precisely, were, "I did not want to lose what we have." I listened to all of it. I sat across from her at the table where I had eaten 100 meals, and I listened. And when she finished, I said, I understood, and I stood up. She stood up too. And then she left. And I washed the 2 cups and put them away, and stood at the window for a long time looking at nothing in particular. I recognized the tiredness. I had felt it before. It was not a new feeling. That was almost the worst part of it, that even this, in the end, felt familiar. I did the tally about a week after she left. I'd been avoiding it the way I'd avoided it all along. But there's a point where avoidance becomes its own kind of answer, and I'd reached it. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and a cup of tea, and I went through the bank statements, the transfer records, the receipts I'd kept out of habit because a man who ran his own business for 28 years keeps receipts. It took about 40 minutes. The roof repair, 240,000 baht, roughly 6,200 euro. The monthly contributions, 15,000 baht from October through the following November when the transfers stopped, 14 months in total, 210,000 baht, about 5,400 euro. The scooter, 45,000 baht, 1,100 euro. Lolly school fees, 110,000 baht, 2,800 euro. The phone I'd bought Nook when hers had stopped holding charge in February, 12,000 baht, 300 euro. A washing machine in March, the old one in the house having given up 18,000 baht, 450 euro. Weekends away, meals out, various small things I could partially reconstruct and partially estimate. The investigator's fee, 14,000 baht, 350 euro. Incidentals I could no longer account for with any precision, another 6,000 or 7,000 euro, estimated conservatively. The total, laid out plainly, was approximately 1,050,000 baht, 27,000 euro, give or take. I looked at that number for a while, against what I'd started with 165,000 euro in an account I had roughly 138,000 remaining, plus whatever the pension and the savings had earned in the time I'd been here, and not spending anything like what I would have spent at home. I was not ruined. I was not even, by the standards of most of the stories that come out of Thailand, particularly badly off. There are men who have lost their houses, men who have lost businesses, men who have lost everything to a legal structure that was designed to take it and left them with nothing to fight with because the property was never theirs to begin with. I knew those men. I'd had a drink with a few of them. I had not, by those measures, done badly. And that was, as I sat there with the number in front of me, the strangest part of all of it. The money alone wasn't enough. That's what I kept coming back to. A man who loses everything can point to the loss and say, there, that's the thing that happened. That's the shape of the damage. I'd had to go looking for the truth because the money alone hadn't been sufficient to surface it. If I'd never seen the phone, never hired the investigator, never read the report, I would have continued. The 15,000 baht would have kept going out on the first of every month, and I would have told myself it was going somewhere reasonable, and I'd have kept not calculating. The money wasn't the trigger. I had to go and find the trigger myself. That's a particular kind of thing to sit with. I moved apartments in May. I hadn't planned to stay in Chiang Mai. I'd thought, in the days after Nook left, that I'd go home. Back to Limerick. Back to Sinead's Sunday calls and the canal walks and the rented flat that was just empty. I sat with that option for a week, and then I realized I didn't actually want it. Thailand hadn't turned on me. The food was still good. The mornings were still worth walking through. The monks still went past at dawn with their bowls, and the city still smelled of jasmine and exhaust, and something frying. And I still found all of it, even now, better than what I'd left behind. So I found a new apartment. Quieter street, a bit further from Niman, closer to the old city. Ground floor, small garden. A landlady who leaves me alone and whose cat comes and sits on the garden wall most mornings. I don't go to the Sunday market. I use a different coffee shop. These are small adjustments and they are sufficient. I rang Sinead properly. Not the version of the call I'd been having with her for months, the one where I was fine and the weather was great and wasn't it a marvelous thing to see a bit of the world. The actual call. I told her most of it, not all of it. Some of it is still mine, still private, still the sort of thing you don't put on a Sunday call with your daughter. But enough of it that she knew what had happened and could respond to the real thing rather than the performed version. She cried a little, which I hadn't expected. She said she was sorry it hadn't worked out. She didn't say anything about having known better. I am grateful for that more than I can easily express. Declan has not said I told you. I want you to know that because I think it matters. He's a quieter man than he used to be, Declan. The years in Melbourne have done something good to him, filed off some of the younger edges. He rang after Sinead told him, and he asked how I was keeping. And I said I was all right, which was mostly true, and he said good, and that was all, and it was exactly what I needed it to be. He is, underneath the quietness, a decent man. I should have rung him back in the Pattaya hotel room. I know that now. What I've been working out, since all of this, is the lesson. People will expect a lesson. Cautionary tales are supposed to end with one. Don't trust bar girls. Don't send money before you've known someone a year. Don't buy property in someone else's name. I know all of those. They weren't the problem. The problem was simpler and harder. I spent 4 years being needed by someone I loved. Being needed is a specific thing. It's not the same as being loved, though it can live alongside love. It has its own weight, its own daily texture. And when Maya died, the love went with her, obviously. What I hadn't accounted for was that the need to be needed didn't go anywhere. It was still there. It was still looking for somewhere to go. I found somewhere for it to go. The money made me feel useful. The usefulness felt like connection. The connection felt like enough for a long time. And the fact that it wasn't exactly what it appeared to be, well, I'm still not sure that changes everything. I'm still not sure I'd have done it differently, even knowing what I know now. That's the part 1000 still working out. That is where I am. That is Nile Brennan's story. And now the channel's voice returns one last time because there are things worth saying after a story like this one. What you've just heard isn't a story about Thailand, not really. It's not a warning about Thai women, or about the gap between cultures, or about what happens when a foreign man with money arrives somewhere he doesn't fully understand. All of those things are in it, but the heart of it is something simpler. It's about what grief does to a man when there's no one watching his accounts, not his bank account, his emotional accounts, the ones that track what he needs and how much it costs him, and whether what he's receiving in return is worth what he's giving. Nile stopped watching those when Meyer died. He didn't know he'd stopped. He thought he was being careful. The most dangerous thing a man can carry into a foreign country isn't naivety. It isn't even loneliness. It's genuine feeling that has lost its bearings. Genuine feeling will lead a man to do everything Nile did. Volunteer the money, inspect the roof himself, pay the school fees, believe the explanation about Bangkok, and every step will feel right, because the feeling behind it is real. The feeling doesn't care whether the situation is real. The feeling just wants somewhere to go. Here at This Is Thailand, we've told a lot of stories. Some of them are about obvious mistakes made by men who should have known better. This one is different, and we wanted you to hear it, because the men who think they know better are sometimes the ones least equipped to see what's coming. If you're grieving something, if you've sold the house and you've got money in an account, and you're looking at flights to somewhere warm because home doesn't feel like home anymore, go. Thailand is worth going to. Chiang Mai is genuinely lovely. The food is real, and the mornings are worth walking through, and the monks at dawn are as good as any photograph. But take someone honest with you. Even if that someone is just the person on the other end of a Sunday phone call who'll say right in a tone that means something, don't cut the line to that person. Don't decide they don't have the full picture. They probably don't, but that's not why you need them. You need them because you're not as certain as you think you are. None of us are, in the end. That's the whole of it. Thanks for watching. This is Thailand. We'll see you next time.